Well, hello everybody. I'm Rick Dancer. Welcome to Get Real with Rick Dancer. And tonight on this episode of our show, we're going to be talking about some of my favorite things: Oregon, the timber industry, and uh, the people that don't understand the timber industry. Because we're here to educate. And so what we've got going on is it's very complicated, but it won't be because we're going to explain it to you. But the way forestry is being handled in Oregon is criminal. And there's people trying to fight that. But a lot of the public, especially in the Willamette Valley, doesn't quite understand how this all works. So we're going to be talking with a county commissioner from a county that is very highly impacted by some stupid decision by public officials. And we'll just get all over that one. But we couldn't do this without our sponsor, Family Dentistry. Dr. Bratland is an amazing guy. He loves freedom. He loves people to be able to speak, and that's why he sponsors our show. We also have Albert Taylor, Endless Possibilities. They work with people in Eugene, Springfield with different abilities. If you're looking for a job that really does matter, you'll feel good. You'll be tired, but you'll feel very good after you spend a day working with people that see different sides of people. They're so amazing. And also, New Leaf Hyperbarics and Wellness Center, Matt McCarl. If you haven't tried hyperbarics, you know, I have a feeling RFK is going to be talking a lot more about things like this: hyperbarics, acupuncture, all those things that are different kinds of treatments and they don't require any drugs. And Matt is really into that, and he can help you out with anything. So I'm going to bring my guest on, and it's Courtney Banks, a county commissioner from Clatsop County. Courtney, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Hi. Thank you.
We have a mutual friend, Jen Hamaker, another troublemaker. And I love people who bring things up that they're not supposed to. So first of all, kind of for our viewers, like we have viewers in Montana and Idaho and places like that too. Tell people, probably in Oregon, that don't even know where Clatsop County is. So why don't you define for people Clatsop County?
Well, has anybody ever seen the movie The Goonies?
There you go. Good girl.
Yeah. So the Goonies were filmed in Cannon Beach, which is South County for Clatsop County, but we also have locations that were filmed in Astoria, and so that's where Clatsop County is Northwest Oregon, and we're right on the coastline.
Yeah, so it's Astoria, Seaside, Cannon Beach, probably one of the most beautiful areas. Honestly, my family always had a home. We sold it this last year, but we used to have a home for 50 years in Pacific City. But my wife's my favorite place still to go is Astoria. I love Astoria because there's a success story of a community that was, when I was a kid, my parents owned the A&W in Seaside, and you didn't go to Astoria. It was a rough place. I mean, it was rough. And now it's like one of the most interesting, because it feels like it's a seaport, but it feels like a seaport. And there's trails and places to visit and history and good food and great beer and good distilleries. And I mean, it's a great little community, and they should be applauded for what they've been able to do in just 25 years, just to turn that whole thing around.
Well, our community is about 40,000 people when you think about the county as a whole. And commonly in the summertime, it will triple in population just by tourism alone. So it's a pretty amazing place to visit also.
So what do you love most about that area?
Well, so I married a gentleman who's fifth generation here in Clatsop County, and we live on a tree farm in unincorporated East County. And I love it for my children. I love it's relaxed, and it's very small town feel. Everyone knows everyone, and it's very community oriented. So that's what I love about it.
So how long have you been a county commissioner?
This is the beginning of my 5th year. I'm actually a school teacher also. Clatsop County has a unique situation where our commissioners are volunteer. And so 3 of us hold full-time jobs outside of our commission work.
I like that. And I mean, not that you're not getting paid, but I like the fact that then, you are because you're in the classroom, it's kind of like Jesus, he had a job. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
and Paul was a fisherman and he was
Yep.
mending nets. So it's not like professional politicians. It's like you have a real job where you do things, and so you
Yep.
keep in touch with your community. You're not in the high lofts of Clatsop County
Yes.
Courthouse.
Yes. I actually love it for the fact that it creates also stability if your elected officials change or rotate too much. Our staff helps create that stability for our community, so there's not huge swings of fluctuations one side or the other.
So what to tell people, you've been in the forestry, your husband's in the forestry business, so you guys understand this industry, but what is going the state is just going crazy when it comes to timber production and protection for spotted owls and all this kind of stuff. Jen and I were talking, and she said, "Rick, you need to talk to Courtney." So tell what's going on that you want to talk about.
Well, to paint a picture, Clatsop County is over 80% forested. It's higher than any other county in the state. Well, maybe Tillamook might rival us. I haven't actually checked their numbers, but so we have, and none of it is federal forest. It's all private or state owned, and our state has gone the route of a habitat conservation plan. With an effort to basically avoid lawsuits by the environmentalist community. Unfortunately, in order to go the route of the habitat conservation plan, they've been pushed the direction of our federal services, or the direction our federal services has gone, which is basically reduce or eliminate production, logging, or greatly reduce or eliminate logging. And we've all seen our federal counterparts and what's occurred to them and their forests by going this direction. And if you're unaware, we burn quite regularly every summer, just wildland forest fires everywhere.
So this
mainly
is on,
starting on federal.
so the habitat conservation plan is just on state land. Is that right?
Well, so there's two conservation plans in the state
Well, of course
Oregon.
there are.
Yeah, one is for, right? Like we're not busy enough.
Right.
And they're being launched by the Department of Forestry and the Board of Forestry and here in Oregon. And one is for the private forest accord, which is private timberlands owned by private industry or private landowners. And then the other one is a state lands habitat conservation plan, which is applied to all state lands in Oregon.
So what this is doing is restricting how much timber you can cut out of those forests by how much. I know I've done this with Jen before, so I know I think
It's a lot.
people would be shocked at how much it's reducing the amount of lumber you can get out of it.
It would be like telling the city of Portland that you could no longer utilize the port of Portland. That's the breadth of what is occurring to Clatsop County. So we have our forest here in Clatsop County. And we used to be able to harvest around 80% of those lands. Everything else was conserved for threatened and endangered species already. We used to use surveys, and we still do until Federal Services approves this habitat conservation plan. But now it's further reducing our production off of state lands up to 40% in Clatsop County. And so all of our social services, our schools, the county budget itself, fire departments, law enforcement, everybody, even our senior care homes, 4-H extension, everybody is now going to have their timber revenues cut by 30 to 40% in Clatsop County.
And you guys, when this first came out, excuse me, you warned people. This is, and you went to the Board of Forestry meetings, and those people ignored the literature and the science that showed this was going to be devastating.
Yes.
But is this because the Forestry Board is so afraid of environmental lawsuits? I mean, have they got people by the you know what?
I
The
fully believe so, yes. And honestly, that is one of the talking points that is utilized in meetings quite regularly, is that this is due to the lawsuits being brought forth by Oregon Wild or other agencies.
So, Courtney, you know what? I'm I'm in Montana, and I'm doing right now a
Mhm,
special on grizzly bears and delisting. And the federal government, they have enough bear. There's plenty. There's
mhm.
way more than was listed in but now they changed the rules. Oh, so you don't have enough in each of the 5 districts. It was never said it had to be in 5 districts. It said here's 5 districts. Here's what the numbers need to be. Now that has to be restored in all these areas. Well, guess what? The bear don't like certain places because there's too many trees. And just for education purposes for people, bears don't eat trees. we, we have so mismanaged our forests that we really need good forest management would be actually taking loggers and putting them in there, thinning these forests out to create land for the spotted owl, the endangered species. But these anti-logging groups is really what they are. They're not environmentalists. You are. These are anti-logging groups, and all they're trying to do is stop. They'll do anything to keep people, the public, and the public, off their state and federal lands.
Mhm. I'm like
So when
I yeah.
in your budget, so what does this look like? Like when the rubber hits the road, what is this doing to your schools? What is this doing to your county budget? Um,
Well, it's completely defunded one of our schools. Our Jewel School District is being completely defunded. They actually tried a lawsuit against the state of Oregon, but it failed to gain traction. So they're facing closure once their money runs out. And they do not they don't have access to the school equalization fund in order to help them maintain their operation levels. And so they also house a local health department up there and community services. And so that's one of the things that is going to occur.
and
It
and
completely defunded.
Jewel's a little
Yeah.
rural town kind of that sits
Yeah.
how far from Astoria and Seaside? Because Seaside and Astoria are kind of big. They're on the Columbia River and the coast, and then Jewel
Yes.
sits in about 25, 30 miles.
Yeah, and they're up in the hills. It's about a 40-minute drive from Astoria to Jewel, 30-minute, 40-minute drive. And so it's it's a small unincorporated community up there, but they have had a lovely school up there just due to the timber revenues that they were receiving.
Do you guys feel like you're just ignored?
I feel like I'm getting choked. I feel like as we are looking at our sheriff's department budget and recognizing that we've lost half of it due to our reduction in timber revenue, and we just built a new jail. And so I feel like we're getting choked. At every turn, we are having to look at different permit costs to make sure that we're not subsidizing things for community. But what that does is it just passes the pressure on to somebody else. And I really greatly dislike that. It makes me angry to watch what is happening to our community just due to the loss of funding.
And in terms of like, say Jewel too, but even your other
Mhm.
communities, the fabric of that, Jewel is a community because it's always been a community. And I think
Mhm.
sometimes it's really easy for people in Gresham and, Portland, Milwaukee to go, well, deal with it, and it's like, well, it's because you're, they're not doing it to you. Well, that you can
Right.
see. They are paying. And I mean, the cost of lumber is going to go up, and is going up. So we can do you ever find it interesting that Oregon, especially, talks about how strong we are on affordable housing? We need affordable housing. So all your HCPs, everything
Mhm.
you're doing to restrict timber, it's just driving the cost of housing up. So they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth.
Well, and it's not just driving the cost of lumber up. we are actually passing off the pressure to another entity in order to create it. So we've taken what I really kind of feel is a holier than thou situation, where we're saying, oh, we're gonna conserve here because we're gonna be good, but we're gonna make you produce for us. And so by making someone else produce for us, we're passing that pressure off, and we're passing it off to other countries
Yeah.
that don't have near the environmental quality and laws that we have. And so these trees and this lumber is being created in an area that is going to have triple the negative impact that we could possibly have. And that is also what makes me angry and a little bit of a baby environmentalist.
Because it's hypocritical.
It's very
Because
hypocritical.
because what you're doing when we do that with oil production, well, as long as somebody else is producing it, and where do people that drive electric cars, do they understand where electricity comes from? Because it's those
I
same dams that they want torn down, that
producing.
creating their Tesla energy, or what most of their Tesla energy is coming from really is coal, which is the evil coal, but yet they don't have to they don't have to see it going into their car. So then it's okay. It's better than gasoline, but it's still coal.
Yeah. I am also, a science teacher, and when you research how these batteries are created and where the minerals come from, it's just an even bigger rabbit hole of a disgusting display of entitlement, in my opinion. And so, granted, we can't just obliterate the use of batteries, but to have this perspective that we're saving the environment, but yet we're not acknowledging what we're doing to other communities in order to do so, is really frustrating.
Right. And what the education part of this is to let
Mm-hmm.
people know that New Zealand and Russia is providing our wood and our
Yes, they are.
plywood. When we have plywood mills here in Oregon where the timber's right out there rotting, when they're not
Yeah.
producing anything and it just rots, and we're driving jobs away, and then we're buying it from countries that don't have near the environmental standards that Oregon is like. I was talking to some people and they said these folks from Scotland and England came over from the timber industry, and they were watching,
Mm-hmm.
said, if we had to do all that you guys do, we would never make it. Because we are like the gold standard. Oregon and Montana and Idaho and Washington, the gold standard for how you do timber. So why don't we use the timber that we have here? And that's, if you wanted to be an environmentalist, isn't that really being more environmental when you do it in places that actually respect the earth?
Yeah, and I will say that our community respects our environment so much. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I've always looked at our forests as kind of our retirement fund. It's our 401k. We keep putting into it and putting into it and putting into it because we want to reap the benefits. We want to reap the benefits, but if we don't stop putting into it, our benefits stop. So we've continually, cherished these lands and these forests, and we've continued to care for them in the healthiest possible way. But we also need to reap a profit so that we can continue to afford to care for them.
Right.
And so it's this full circle. And once we stop that profit, then who pays for the care of the forest? Who pays for the agency, the Department of Forestry? Who pays for the services to? So it's going to be that cost is going to just get pushed off onto the constituents further, and that also is frustrating.
So, what didn't the head of the Oregon Board of Forestry recent resign kind of quickly and abruptly, and under some
Yeah.
pressure from people?
So it was the state forester. Yes, he did resign. Now, I want to say that he's a very personable and kind human. Like he's a pretty nice guy. But I cannot I will verbalize the frustration that I've had with the Department of Forestry's budget and the fact that they have not addressed their budget shortfalls, and that they also He recommended this habitat conservation this plan go through, also recognized that it was going to cause the department to go bankrupt.
Well, they
And
had the figures, and then
yes,
you have
yes,
all these business people who serve on the board appointed by the governor. So they're
yes.
people that are, in step with the governor and what she
Mm-hmm.
wants, or Kate Brown, the former she governor. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's just, and they didn't stand up for it. And they knew, a lot of them knew, and
It was in their face. It was presented, it was even the department's own numbers that they were utilizing at the end for the final decision that basically said, this is going to bankrupt the department. And they went forward anyway with the caveat, well, not even a caveat, with the assumption that legislature was going to bail them out.
the Oregon legislature is never going to bail
Right.
anyone out on an
No.
environmental issue. Do you think
Mm.
Oregon is so much into virtue signaling that it's destroyed? And this, it's not the real Oregonians. You know what I mean?
Mm-mm. A lot of the lawsuits and a lot of the push has come from the outside of Oregon.
Yeah.
It's not Oregon values. It's not Oregon. It's not Oregon environmentalists even. But yes, the values of Oregon have come from almost, I would say, a federal level. A push from our federal services to do things, but these federal services, Fish and Wildlife, they're not foresters.
Right.
They're not foresters. They do not know how to run a forest. They've not been educated in how to run a forest, but yet they're telling our Department of Forestry that we want this number of acres and this amount of connectivity, and we want these things and those things. It's not going to create a healthy forest. It's just numbers on a piece of paper. And what's going to end up from all of this is what our federal forests have gone through, which is burning every year.
Right. What if they went to the real foresters, like the people that are like loggers and scalers and buckers and
Yeah.
fallers and all
Wouldn't that have been a great thing?
how, we're always looking for the best, science and best interest, and here's all these people who have been ignored for 50
Yeah.
years, and they're
They
out there
even
every day.
ignored their own district. So the Department of Forestry wrote this plan in Salem. They did not talk to a single district. There was no district foresters involved. There was no foresters on the actual lands. And so what you'll find in our habitat conservation plan is there are actual clear cuts that are in conservation areas. They will never reach habitat by the time this plan expires in 70 years. But somehow they're in there because nobody bothered to talk to the local districts, the local foresters, the local loggers. No one.
What do you hope the general public starts to understand better?
That this was a crap habitat conservation plan that has no logic. So I have always believed to do your due diligence, and I support, protecting threatened and endangered species. And in fact, I think the Federal Service surveys are an amazing methodology to continue to move forward and do good things with in regards to forestry. This habitat conservation plan was a way to cut out the extra effort that those surveys are. And so once this goes through, they don't have to survey ever again. But what they did is they've taken lands that don't have spotted owl. They're not spotted owl habitat. So they're not actually protecting anything.
Right.
Other than a tree, which the tree is not an endangered species. And so, it's not going to do the job. It's not going to do what they want it to do. And it's just going to put abundant pressure on the communities. Our economy, we're going to lose over 100 jobs out of our economy locally. That's not just statewide. And you've already seen mill closures across the state.
Oh yeah.
It's a horrible choice economically, But that also is a horrible choice socially. It's going to put additional pressure on our social services and our unemployment. It's going to put additional pressure on our schools, who are also having funding removed from them because of this. And so it's going to put additional pressure on our agencies, which we are now going to struggle to fund. And so I never wanted to be a tourist community that when you looked behind the curtain, you saw just desperation. But if we can't find an economy to replace what we're losing, we're going to have desperation behind the tourist front.
Well, it's interesting. Somebody asked me, well, don't you trust the habitat conservation plan? And I said, why would I? Look what you did with the spotted owl. You came up with a plan, and then most of the timber that burned in the Labor Day fires up the McKinsey, where I used to live, was spotted owl habitat. So the very idiotic, stupid, non-scientific plan that you came up with to protect this owl didn't work. You ended up burning up all this land anyway. And then you discovered it was actually the barred owl that was taking the habitat from the spotted owl. So now Fish and Wildlife is going to kill, like, murder 450,000 barred owls to protect the spotted owl.
Yeah.
Like, what? And you want me to trust the habitat conservation plan?
I never thought.
I'm sorry.
I never thought genocide would be the answer. Like, I get so angry about that, because genocide of a species should not be the answer to save another species.
Where's all the freaking PETA people and the so-called environmentalists who would be like, no, you're going to go murder, this barred owl and because the spotted owl is too much of a wuss to survive,
Well, and have we ever heard of evolution?
I know. Yeah, sometimes, I went on a story with a scientist when I was a news guy. This is years ago, and he gave me a live mouse, and I was holding it in my hand. We're out in the thing because we were looking at spotted owls. A spotted owl came down and took that out of my hand. This is not an animal that's going to survive very long. If you'll eat, if here's Mr. Gidbar, and you're going to come down and take your little mouse from me. This is not a wise owl. He wasn't in the Pooh land. He wouldn't have made it with Winnie the Pooh. He was not the wise owl.
Well, and if we could find a way to help this species survive, great. But I don't think that killing off another species is the methodology. That's not how biology works. I mean, it's not how. It's just not how it works.
No, you don't. So if you could sit down with Oregon Governor Tina Kotek, what would you tell her?
Well, this is actually kind of a loaded question. So
I purposely.
It may not make sense to you. But what I would sit down and tell her is we have very few off-ramps for this habitat conservation plan on state lands. And currently they have a PFA that protects the salmon. And what I would tell her is to add state lands to that PFA and protect the salmon, the coho salmon, because the reason why they went down this path with the habitat conservation plan was because of a coho lawsuit with Tillamook. And so what I would tell her is to add state lands to the PFA, protect those coho salmon. That gets us out of that lawsuit. And then circle the wagons, try again, but this time actually do it right. And that would mean involving all of your stakeholders, involving your tribes, involving your counties, involving everyone from the beginning, because they did not involve even their district offices. They did not involve the tribes. They did not involve the counties. They didn't involve anybody in this plan. This plan was written in a very small echo chamber. And so nobody was in there asking the question, do we have to give all of this away? Do we actually have to give this number of acres away in order to get this take permit? Nobody was there. asking the question of why this much? Can we do it with just 10 acres? Why 100? And basically battling. Like this was there was no battle. This was like, how much can we give you? That's how much you want? Okay, we'll give it to you. Versus a negotiation. There was no negotiation. This was, let me just hand you all of this and then hopefully everything makes you happy.
Well, not to get over political, but it's my show, so who cares? But I find that the most interesting thing about Donald Trump is people, these same people that don't negotiate, when he does and he plays hardball and says, to Colombia, screw you, you're taking these people back, and they fold in less than 12 hours. That's how if people went to bat and weren't so afraid that the environmentalists, these little lawsuit groups, are going to take them to court. The other thing that I have a real problem with is these judges. So you've got judges who are not scientists. They don't know they don't know how a forest works. I was in Southern Oregon shooting some stuff for this Truth About Timber series I do. And here up on the top, they showed me on the top of this mountain, it was a in process old growth forest. So it was a forest that was about 50 years old, but the way they had the canopy, they cleared it. It was all, thinned and all that. And it was growing beautiful. And that's what it's going to turn into, a beautiful old growth forest. Except the problem is, here's a road. Here's that forest. Down below it is a shit show. It's a bunch of trees falling down, second growth. Storms came in, nothing's done, hasn't been managed. So as soon as a fire starts, it's going to hit that and then go right up that hill and destroy 50 years worth of work that's been done. And why don't we take these judges out into the forest and educate the hell out of them? Because all they're listening to is people who want to shut down the forest, not people who are doing what's best for Oregon. And then you get the Willamette Valley and these feel-good people who just want to go, well, see it. We're taking care of the forest. No, you don't even know this isn't taking care of the forest. And I think people are starting to figure it out a little bit because they're burning up. I mean, we're in a crisis all over the West. I mean, California is not even representative of what would happen in Oregon. Look what happened that Labor Day weekend, how much timber and how many people lost their homes. But then those same people will say that environment, they shouldn't be living there anyway. Like you get to decide where people live.
Yeah, well, I will say that our crisis is actually probably going to get worse because after each of those fires, there was a limit on the amount of salvage harvest. And so what that leaves in those burn scars is just more tinder, more matchsticks ready to burn again. And so those burn scars will burn again. And we can't fight fire on the ground with those snags. You can't OSHA won't let you put a firefighter on the ground in those snags because it's a hazard. Snags are what kill firefighters. And so
what I don't understand either, Courtney, is like, I've seen those places and wildlife can't live there. A herd of elk and bear can't get through when you have, so much downage and stuff. They're animals are just like us. Where do fish go in the river? They go hide in the eddy because they don't want to face the current. I mean, you know what I mean? So when animals go, if we have trails, they're going on the trails. They're not going to run over the top of, dozens and dozens of trees like that. They're going to take the easy way. So we're destroying animal habitat at the same time we're not cleaning up the forest.
Yeah, and when you don't clean it up, you don't replant appropriately, and it's just a vicious circle. And so if you leave it to the nature to replant, recovery of that forest has been tripled, if not quadrupled, in time.
So what would you say to the forestry poobah under Donald Trump? If you got an audience with the Trump administration, what would you say to them?
Help us out, because right now the reason why we can't log in the federal forest is because everything has a lawsuit filed even before a plan is completed. There's got to be a methodology. Like, I don't mind if somebody is suing someone else if it's relevant.
Right. But it's not.
But if there's no relevance, and it's just assumption or it's just an ideology, it's not a viable lawsuit. But those viable lawsuits lock us up for years.
Yeah.
And so it could, I mean, and this could be to the fishing industry. This could apply to the forest industry. It could apply to any natural resources industry. But locking up an industry for years is not the right methodology in order to have, in order for communities to function, in order for industries to function. And I get it. That's the purpose. They don't want us to function. They don't want us to log. So they're being very successful in their methodology. But I would love for there to be teeth removed from the process. Maybe it's, if you file a lawsuit, you're filing it with your own money.
Yeah.
And you have some skin in the game.
Skin in the game. That's what they need to do. $500,000, you can file a lawsuit. Otherwise, fuck you.
Well, and because there's no skin in the game, they have nothing to lose.
You know, in Montana, and I'm sure this is the same there with the grizzly bear here, they file a lawsuit over everything. And the problem is they've got them so locked up that they can't even get in there to clean up the forest to make adequate habitat for the bear. So they don't care about the bear. All they care about is logging up the forest. But 80% of the cases they take to court, Fish and Wildlife wins.
Yeah.
So, but it takes them 3-4 years. That ups the price of the sale. It keeps people not working, and they're constantly. If a mill, you know this in your county, if a mill it wants to invest, they need to know that they're going to have a timber supply in 5 years to invest the kind of millions and millions of dollars it takes to make a modern, functioning, use everything in that piece of timber. For those of you out there who think that there's a bunch of waste, nothing is wasted. Even the bark is used in the kilns to dry the wood at Hampton Lumber and in Warrenton, Oregon. They have kilns that they put that stuff in. So nothing is wasted. And you can't do that kind of investment when you don't know you're even going to have timber in 2 years.
That's exactly right. And so who ends up paying for all of this process? It's the taxpayers.
Yeah.
Who ends up paying for that 3-year injunction on operation? It's the taxpayers. It's not like it's magic money. Like the pressure gets passed off to us, and so that's why so many people are struggling.
Do you think that do you have hope that the Trump administration is going to do something? I mean, I know I've heard inkling. I mean, I don't know if they'd come in and just take the habitat conservation plan, but that they're going to get more involved with this to try to straighten it out. I kind of do, just because I see him moving at full speed. I have heard him say a couple things about timber industry. I'm going, oh, we need to get Courtney or I always think I need to get Jen Hamaker in front of President Trump so she can sit down and go, no. Let me explain how you go after this thing, and get her whip out. And this is what you do. But
I listened to his press conference in California, and he had a few good things to say.
Yeah.
He was like, your policies created this.
Right.
And I will be honest, those policies came from federal services.
Yeah.
And so if federal services is pushing these policies on Oregon, I really hope that there is something that happens here in that area where it says, let's have some common sense. We can have conservation areas. I'm not saying no to conservation areas. We can have, protection areas, but the problem is the lack of forest management creates destruction.
Well, what people don't understand too, Courtney, is that and I'm just, because I just did this story, that's why I'm using Montana facts, but Oregon, I'm sure, is close to the same. I think like close to 80% of the federal forest here is in some kind of conservation or not usable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's not, it's not like, and Oregon is huge federal timber. I mean, I think it's 75%. I don't remember. I looked it up a few years ago, and it was super high. I mean, only
Yeah,
Texas, I think, had more public lands than we did. But it's like, so if you could get that law to change on the federal lands and let people start seeing it, it might put pressure on Oregon to start, instead of legislators just, feeling good about themselves because they passed some pseudo environmental law, and it didn't affect their district. That's the other problem you guys have when you're rural
that's the
Oregon.
other problem.
Yeah, you can't,
Well, and I
go ahead.
well, I think about state lands. Okay, so state lands is 3% of Oregon's forest. 3%.
Yeah,
So if our federal forest couldn't save the spotted owl or the coho or the whole list of 14 species that is on the list for our habitat conservation plan, or the red tree vole, or any of these other species, why do we think that adding a percent is going to somehow move the needle?
but you used the key word there, think.
Right,
you
right.
know, I mean, this is complete virtue signaling. I feel like the message is changing though. I feel like people are
I hope
starting to
so.
go, and I think once you start pointing out the hypocrisy and show that the true environmentalists, the people that are the most environmentalists, are your loggers, the people that live in these areas. One of the guys I talked to in this thing says, we don't live here to work. We work
Mm-hmm.
here to live because
Mm-hmm.
we love the mountains and the rivers and we
Yes.
don't want them dirty, and we fish. We use these forests and we love seeing bear and, you know, weasels and whatever else is out
Yeah.
there, lynx and that kind of stuff. And how many of these environmental people have ever even set foot in Clatsop County, Oregon?
I don't know, but I will say that I'm really tired of all of the rules putting pressure on one industry when you see other entities like ODOT or Portland even drop loads upon loads of crap, literal crap, into our rivers.
Yeah,
It rained too much, so our septic systems poured into the rivers. Like,
right.
how is that fair and equal?
Okay. Well,
How is that
well,
okay?
several years ago, I went to Rome, Oregon, which is on the whole other side of the state from you. And I was talking to a rancher. It's right on the border of Idaho. And I was talking to this rancher lady, and she said, "Yeah, they made us come out here, and we had to fence off the Owyhee River, where we've been grazing and watering our cattle for generations." And she said, and nobody paid attention to all the lakes that man-made lakes we made for elk out in the desert. And she says, so I go to Portland to fight this. And I stood on the banks of the Willamette River and I saw a river encased in concrete and pollution. And I said, you're going to come to Rome, Oregon and tell me how to manage my land when you can't even manage your own. That's the bullshit that needs to stop. You take care of your backyard in Portland, then you can come out to Clatsop County or Jordan Valley or French Glen and you can put your hands in. But otherwise, shut the hell up because you don't know what you're talking about. And you're destroying
Yeah.
people's lives that you don't know, you don't care about them because all you're doing is virtue signaling and you're a single species management people. So
Yeah.
you pick the bear, you pick the cute ones, the little spotted owl and the thing like that, and you say, "Oh, here's what we're doing." They kind of started ignoring the marble murrelet more because they can't find it.
Well,
So
well,
it's pretty elusive to pick as a project,
it's a small bird.
Yeah,
But I will say, like foresters, myself, we want to protect species. We
yeah,
want to protect the rivers, the streams, our land. We want to, and we work hard to do it. And I wish that the industry had been better over the years with showing folks when we do have a logging operation, where does the money go?
right,
Because a lot of the money goes to rehabilitation of the lands.
Right.
A lot of money goes to stream rehab, to protect the fish, to like better culverts, better bridges. A lot of it is for access for recreation too. And so, but if we're not making any money, we can't do those activities.
Right. And logging's like, I interviewed Jay Browning a few years ago, and
he's
he
a
has,
man. He's wonderful.
he's the man, and he has so much equipment that is specially made so that you don't rip up the forest ground and that you don't take trees through streams. But those pieces of equipment are $2 and $3 million. So this is a big investment to then all of a sudden have the governor, have her little HCP plan, put it through her forestry board that she set up and appointed. And then they come in, and then he has to start selling off equipment because he doesn't have enough business to do his job. So you can't have it both ways. You can't have environmental stewardship of the forest. You can't build affordable houses when you're doing all this other feel-good stuff that really isn't working. So,
and it's shutting us down. It's shutting us down.
So last thing I'll ask you, you're a teacher, and I know you don't take politics into your classroom, but are you getting these kids to critically think, like for themselves? Do you know what I mean? Like to best class I ever took in high school was a critical thinking class, and got me in the most trouble in my life, and still does, because I will never stop asking questions, and if something doesn't make sense, I want to know why.
I think one of the most enjoyable things I have is in my science classes, where I have the kids explore all of the pros and cons, because every good thing has cons, and it's a balancing act. It's where is the balance, and it's seeking balance. I'm not seeking to go all the way one side with anything that I do. What I'm seeking is where is the balance for having this really good thing occur. Wind energy, it's a really good thing, but let's explore the cons.
Right.
And it just is allowing students to critically think and decide for themselves, not tell somebody else what they should do. Themselves what they think is right. And I think that I wish that for that environment for all students, for them to take their own inherent values and their own ability to identify the pros and the cons of a situation, and then make their own decision. Because as we've seen, you can't align yourself with ideologies, because ideologies aren't logical.
Right. And I think, we're also learning as people from the last 5 years that you have to ignore the naysayers and the people that scream, because there's good forces and there's evil forces, and they're always going to be at odds, and you just have to kind of move forward. And I see so many amazing students now that, especially now, a lot of like high school kids and even college, they're starting to go, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. And I think we had to get here. I hope for you and in your county, Clatsop County, and all the other small rural counties in Oregon, the best thing that could happen was that they had a voice, and that people start, I think it's shameful that this Greater Idaho movement, which I totally support, but it's like you've got, a shitload of the state that's ready to go to Idaho, and it's not because they don't like Oregon, but it's because they're not being listened to. And they went to the governor and have tried to get meetings with her, and she doesn't meet. She said something trivial in her, state of the state address about this whole thing, but they've tried to meet with her and she doesn't meet with them. If I was governor of Oregon and I had that much of my state wanting to exit the state, I think I'd get my ass out of Salem and get over to, Burns,
and ask them why.
Ask some questions and shut up and listen,
Yeah. I mean, I understand it, because the policies from Salem are choking rural Oregon on the fishing, farming, and forestry. It's choking rural Oregon. And you see that with transportation bill out for the clean energy trucks. Like, we can't, it's the expense.
Right. Look at
We just can't.
all they need to do is Salem needs to look south, far south to
Mhm.
California and see what they've done. And that's where you're headed. And Oregon, that's not Oregon. That's why I left. I just couldn't do it anymore. And I
Well, and
think that,
really, really worried because,
yeah,
we can't fight fire without FEMA dollars in Oregon.
right.
And so when I'm watching what's happening at the national level, Oregon's got to pay real close attention to what's happening, because we can't afford to lose federal dollars in order to fight our forest fires in the summer.
Well,
And we can't afford it.
right. Well, what they need to learn is Trump's serious. And it's like, if you start farting around with this stuff and not following the law, it's not just your ideology that's going to suffer. It's the people of Oregon are going to suffer. And,
Yeah.
And she's headed that way, she budgeted $1 million for 12 years, which I don't understand, because she's only there for like 3 or something. But for 12 years, so she can fight Trump. And it's like, maybe you should take that $12 million and put it into affordable housing.
or our schools that are being defunded because of the habitat conservation plan.
Right.
I mean, that would go a long way.
Boy, Courtney, you and I just single-handedly solved all the problems of the world. Now, if only we could get somebody to listen to us.
Pay attention.
Yeah. Well, at least we have a platform. That's good. Hey, thank you for coming on and just kind of just talking like that, because I really do. I mean, I love your heart and soul for the small community, and you're the kind of county commissioners I want in my county. And
thank you.
yeah, no, and I think it's cool. No wonder you're friends with Jen Hamaker. I can understand that.
She can say all the things without a filter, and I love it.
If I was going to get into a bar fight, I'd want her near me.
I mean, honestly, so I don't know if you know our previous Senator, Betsy Johnson.
Betsy and I are dear, dear friends.
I love that woman.
I do too.
That woman, I learned so much from her. And so she's kind of like my goal.
She said, well, you're going to have to say the F word more. I've had her on my show. I totally supported her when she ran for governor, and I took a lot of heat for it. I still have Republicans that hate me, but I don't care.
Me too.
But she came on my show and she's like, "Hey, Dancer, so can I cuss?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you can cuss." And she goes, "Really? On your show? Sorry, that's fine." I went, "Yeah." So we're kind of going around, and all of a sudden I said, "What do people want?" She goes, "People want somebody that's going to come in and do shit. They're tired of these fucking idiots that aren't talking." And I was just like going, "Whoa!" And people started writing me in, going, "I love this woman. Who is this?" I mean, she cuts right to the chase, and you know what you get. And she was never afraid to go against her party if it was against Oregon. She is like a Mark Hatfield and a Vic Attia, and those people that really, Phil Kiesling, the Secretary of State, people like that who really did and do love Oregon first. Not their position.
For the people.
Yeah.
It's for the people.
Right.
And it's not for some other ideology or religion. It's for the people and what is going to be best for the people or the community that's involved.
Well, I think you're following some good shoes there.
Yeah, I like her.
If you see her, tell her Rick Dancer said hi.
I will.
All right. We'll talk to you. Courtney, thank you again so much for joining me. Okay, hang in there just for a second. Hold on.
Okay.